Welcome back to the Contributor Corner for Run Radio. Jennifer, the archaeologist, has some wise words, some wisdom, insight, and even history for us. What do you got today?
Hi, Trenna. So I spent the majority of my 20s as a semi-professional student here in Springfield. So I studied a lot of local history, a lot of local archaeology, and I thought this time I would just talk a little bit about the founding of Springfield, which is much more diverse than a lot of local Springfieldians, in my experience, believe it to be. So Springfield was settled in the early 19th century. We hear a lot about the Campbell family and a lot of these really prominent families like the Phelps that moved in, and everything around Springfield is named after these families. So we're very familiar with them. But they were actually not the first people to settle here.
Hmm.
When Europeans first began exploring what is now Missouri in the early 1700s, everything in what's now Missouri, south of the Missouri River, was actually the territory of the Osage Nation. So most of their villages were up on the Osage River and the Missouri River, but this was their territory and they did protect it. And they came out and to do seasonal hunting and things. So they probably camped around the area because Springfield was actually a field of springs. There are a lot of natural springs.
Oh,
So it was a really good place for people to camp and stop and hunt, get fresh water. But they ceded to the U.S. government, they ceded the property that would become Springfield in 1808. And the US government decided that Missouri was actually going to be the new Indian territories. That's where they were going to take all the remnants of the tribes from east of the Mississippi and they were going to put them in Missouri. Now, as we now know, Oklahoma became Indian territory. So all the tribes that were told that they'd be resettled for the final time here in the Ozarks, about 20 years later, the government changed their mind to move them on to Oklahoma. Um,
oh,
but right around Springfield in 1818 and 1819, the Delaware Lenape, who are originally from New York State, they ended up here in Springfield. They settled a place that's now known as Delaware Town, which is between Springfield and the James River. And then the next year, the Kickapoo Nation, who originated around the Great Lakes region, they ended up being settled here on top of the Springfield Plateau between what is now downtown Springfield and Kickapoo High School.
oh, neat.
Um, that area at the time was called the Kickapoo Prairie. So they settled here in 1818, 1819, and we actually know what the area was like because a military road already passed through the area. It's probably why they got settled here to begin with. And a man from out east who was looking for potential lead mines in the area. It's called Henry Schoolcraft. Some people may have heard of him. He kept a really detailed travel journal talking about the minerals and the landscape and plants and animals and families that he stayed with in log cabins. And we have he a couple years later, he traveled in 1819 and he published it in a couple years later, but we actually have his travel journal, so we can read about what the area looked like at the time. So that's really cool. Unfortunately, in the 1820s, 1821, Missouri became a state. White settlers started pouring in, and that's when the new legislation of Missouri decided they did not want Native Americans in this state, and that was one of their first things they did was get all of the Native Americans pushed out. So in 1831, 1832, that's when everybody started getting pushed out to Oklahoma. The Delaware left; they went to Kansas. The Kickapoo got sent to Oklahoma, and all these white settlers came in, including the Campbells, who showed up. Can't remember. They showed up in the 1830s.
Hmm.
So they came in and they actually brought a lot of the early pioneers brought a whole bunch of enslaved people with them. So there were white settlers, and we also do have very early African American pioneer settlers that people don't talk about very often. So all of these people came in and they took over these farmsteads that the Kickapoo and the Delaware had spent 10 years building structures and clearing fields, chopping and planting orchards. Those were already ready, and these settlers just came in and took over a lot of those properties. So it made it very easy for these families to come in and really set down roots quickly and form Springfield, which is probably why Springfield became one of the major cities in the Central Ozarks pretty early on.
Really neat stuff. Thank you so much for sharing. Find out more about all of our contributors at runradio.net.